What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Strength Coach Rants. I'm your host, Connor Lyons, and today we're going to talk about ankle mobility and hockey.
You know what time it is? No talk, just vibes.
She said she missed that feel. I told her about that new drug. See slow where the jets at.
So there's this relatively new trend in hockey. I say relatively new. It's really the past maybe like 3, 4, 5 years where there's this big focus on ankle mobility when it comes to hockey players. And the reason that there's this focus is because historically hockey players have not had great ankle range of motion because they play a game in a very stiff boot that doesn't allow for a lot of movement. So if you're not somebody who spends a lot of time off the ice developing, you're going to really struggle to gain ankle flexibility and mobility. And so that can cause issues all the way up the chain if we're lacking, I guess pronation, supination, you call it internal, external rotation of the ankle, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. That's going to cause some compensatory actions up the chain because the ankle is meant to be very mobile. If the ankle becomes restricted, now all of a sudden we're going to get some movement at the knee that we don't necessarily want, and it can cause some problems. So in the beginning, this focus, like there was value in it and it mattered and it was good, right? But now, like social media does, it takes everything and now this is the only thing that matters, and we must adjust every other aspect of our training in an attempt to really focus on this ankle mobility because it is the most important thing, and that's just not the case. And today I'm going to break down why this is such an exercise in futility, and I'm going to give you some advice on maybe what we should focus on instead. So I want to preface this episode with the fact that I think ankle mobility is very, very important. All right, it's important for all sports, and it's probably more important for hockey players, specifically because they spend so much time on the ice in a rigid boot that doesn't allow for a lot of movement. All right, the last time I kind of spoke on this, I got attacked by a few physicians and a few strength coaches and a few athletic trainers because they thought that I was making the argument that ankle mobility is not important. Right? What I am hypothesizing here, I guess what I am directly saying here is that ankle mobility is not the most important. It shouldn't be on the front end of everything. It should be part of your physical preparation program, but it should not be the focus unless you are someone who is really deficient. And we'll go over what that means momentarily here. So let's see. So on the ice, right? You look at a hockey skate. If you are somebody who wears them relatively tight, there's not a lot of movement that happens in the ankle. The studies show it's right around 20 degrees. If you modify your skates or you wear them a little bit more loosely, you may get 25 degrees of dorsiflexion out of your ankles while wearing skates, right? So 25 degrees isn't a lot. And I've actually got, let me see if I can find it. There we are. All right, so in hockey skates, right? This is like elite skaters here. The average amount of ankle dorsiflexion while skating that we get is right around 14. If you're listening and you're not watching, it is just shy of that 15 mark there. So we're looking at about 14 degrees of dorsiflexion, right? Now these guys, when they're off the ice, they have about 24 degrees on average of ankle dorsiflexion, right? So they have 25 degrees, let's say 24 degrees, and their skates are going to give them on average about 14 degrees, right? Now, on the far right side of this graph, you can see the modified or flexible skates are going to give them about 19 degrees on average, right? So if we are at the upper end, if we do have these modified skates or we wear them relatively loosely, we're going to be getting about 19 degrees, and we already have 24 degrees. Can you riddle me what the hell is the point of trying to achieve more ankle range of motion in an effort to be able to utilize that on the ice? Because I don't see it. If I have the requisite ankle mobility at 25, right? Let's see. Yeah, at 24, and my skates at most are going to give me like 19, 20, why would it be important for me to try to increase my range of motion or like my mobility within my ankle if I can't take advantage of that once I'm on the ice because the limits of the skates, right? So again, off the ice, these guys will have on average about 24. on the ice and skates on average about 14, maybe 15. And then with these modified skates, we're looking upwards of like 19 to 20. So we have the requisite amount of mobility that's going to be allowed when we go to skate. Trying to add more is an exercise in futility because there are a lot of other things we need to do, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit here, right? And this is the average ankle dorsiflexion off the ice and weight bearing of just various communities here. So the NHL level, right? These are NHL professionals. It's a study done like quite a while ago. About 23, 24 is about the average, right? Again, remember those modified skates are giving us like maybe 20. Junior elite hockey, all right, there's a little bit lower, but we're still above that threshold, right around 23. Your recreational hockey players still have about 19 or 20, right? So we are in the range of a healthy ankle. The general population is right around 12 or 13, right, degrees. So from an orthopedic health perspective, even these recreational hockey players are right about where they would be, right? And I'll bring up that other graph here and kind of show them side by side, right? So if in hockey skates that are not modified, we are getting about 13, in our recreational hockey players who are probably skating in these skates that aren't modified or worn loosely are already getting about 20 degrees, 19, 20 degrees. We have enough ankle mobility, like we just do. There is no point in focusing on obtaining more ankle mobility to create a better stride. It doesn't like math. The math doesn't math there. So you take a look at this. I don't know, pause it, dive into it. I'll link the actual studies in the description of this video here. But, excuse me, we have plenty of ankle range of motion. We don't need to focus on obtaining more if it's not going to allow us to do more things and skate better, because the skates aren't going to allow us to have to have that benefit us in any possible way, right? The next graph I'm going to pull up. What is... All right, so not pulling up a graph yet. So we get plenty of dorsiflexion. We have plenty of ankle range of motion. When we, as a profession, decide that we are going to focus on this ankle mobility like it is the most important thing, what it does is it kind of destroys other adaptations that we want, right? So we see this like knees over toes stuff. We see heel elevated squats. We see floating heel with massively aggressive shin angles in an attempt to gain more, stiffness in the heel cord and or more dorsiflexion of the ankle. And that is not going to carry over to the ice in any meaningful way. Right now, you could make the argument that having more mobile ankles is going to allow you to get into better positions off the ice, right? So if I don't have the requisite ankle mobility to be able to sprint the way I want to, and I need to obtain that, but according to the numbers, most of the athletes already have that. They've got plenty. They don't need more. And to take like main movements and time, like the very limited time that we have in the gym to shift the focus from the hips to the ankles, is a total exercise in futility, and it is gimmicky, and it is sex appeal, and it is stupid, in my opinion. Sorry, my dog's being weird right now. All right, next thing we're going to pull up here is see a lot of coaches utilizing the heel elevated squats, right? So they're using wedges, or they're using like plates under the heels, or anything in an attempt to allow you to get more quote unquote depth when you're squatting. Now, the problem with this is, right, and this is something that hockey strength and conditioning coaches are doing in an attempt to create more ankle mobility, or because they think the athlete doesn't have enough ankle mobility to squat. And we'll go over kind of why that's wrong in a minute here. We are taking the focus out of the hips, right? And I'm going to go over in a minute or two why that's important, but just understand that when we focus on the ankle, we have to take the focus off of the hips. That's the way like movement kinematics work. You cannot have this aggressive shin angle and have the hips fire in the manner that they need to. It is impossible. So here's a video explaining this heel elevated movement. Actually, this is a first short that popped up, but this dude did a pretty good job, and I'll let him talk about it here.
What is the point of the heel elevated squat? By elevating the heels, we allow ourselves to keep a more upright torso, which takes a lot of the stretch off the glutes, puts more stretch and focus on the quads, and forces the quads to be the prime mover in hip extension. Another great thing about this exercise, specifically for those that work out in a garage gym or at home like myself, if you don't have access to quad focus machines, this is a great way to target and focus on the quads. Now you can load this movement up with just your body weight like so. You can load it up with kettlebells or dumbbells off to the side or in the goblet position, or you can load it up with a barbell.
Yeah, so I think he did a pretty good job, and so this is the part that I think is most important. He talks about the upright torso, and what the upright torso does is takes the stress out of the hips and places it directly into the quads. And in about 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, I don't know how long I'm going to rant for, we're going to go over like why that matters and why taking the focus off the hips and putting it into the knee is such a bad idea when it comes to hockey players.
Puts more stretch and focus on the quads and forces the quads to be the prime mover in hip extension.
Yep, and we don't want that, and we'll go over why in a minute here. But this is a common tactic used by strength and conditioning professionals, specifically with the sport of hockey. It's everywhere, but specifically with the sport of hockey because they want their athletes to be able to get more depth when they squat. Right now, the reason I have a problem with this is because like 99% of the athletes that cannot get depth in a squat, right? The immediate thought is, oh, it's their ankles. No, it's not their ankles. It is their hips. I guarantee you they have plenty of ankle range of motion to be able to get the depth in a squat that they need. What they lack is the strength and the mobility in the hips to be able to achieve that depth. And I'll link in the description an article I wrote about this. Actually, I probably get a couple thousand hits on this article every month. It's a good read. I think I explained my case well as to why it's not your ankles, it's your hips. But again, that's not something we want to do. In an effort to increase ankle mobility or skirt around the fact that we don't think that we have depth, right? So in that specific instance, you're taking the stress out of the hips and placing it into the knees, right? Which actually correlates pretty perfectly with the fact that you don't have the strength in the hips to accomplish the task. And now you move that burden to the knees and all of a sudden you can do it, right? So we don't want to do that. And that's not a workaround for like quote unquote lack of ankle mobility. And it is not a good idea when it comes to hockey players specifically. And again, I know I keep saying I'll talk about this, but I'll talk about this in a couple minutes here. Actually, I'm going to talk about this right now. Perfect. All right, so there's a study that came out in 1980, and I did a short on this that I'll link in the description here, called Moments of Force, Power, and Muscle Coordination in Speed Skating. So what this did was it was like an EMG study of the different musculature throughout a skating stride, like what was used and when it was used and how much of it was used. And the ankle itself, the only time that the ankle was like the quote unquote predominant like force production muscle was, or I guess you'd call it like the gastroc, the calves itself, but the ankle contributing directly to force production was during a glide stance, right? Now, when you're playing hockey, probably near 50% of the time you're in a quote unquote 2-foot glide. And that is the only time that your ankle is actually contributing in any meaningful way to the skating stride is when you're not skating, which is kind of interesting. Yep. All right. So this specific chart here, right? Again, if you're listening, you're not watching. It's a joint contribution to force production, push-off phases only when it comes to hockey. I dropped off excuse me. I dropped off the glide phase because it's just unimportant in what we're talking about right now. So if you look early push-off phase, that blue is hip extension, all right? The orange is knee extension, and then the green is ankle plantar flexion, right? So the reason that we want a lot of dorsiflexion is because it's going to allow us to get better plantar flexion. And you can see at no point in time is the ankle more than, it looks like about 17% here, all right? So at no point in time during the skating stride do the ankles provide any real meaningful benefit, right? They are mostly a force transfer up until the very end. I guess it more so in the beginning, because you can see, again, it's like maybe 18 or 19 there, and then it drops to what looks like about 14, and then it stays kind of in that space as you go. But the initial movement is coming from the hips. About 80 or 65 to 75% of the force production in a skate at any given phase is coming from the hips. The knee mostly transfers, and same with the ankle. So the vast majority of what you need when you go to skate is coming from the hips and not from the ankles or the knees. And that's important to understand when we're doing these things to try to increase ankle range of motion. We take the focus off the hips, which is really what we want. You know, so that's my frustrations with this whole ankle range of motion nonsense that we're going through right now. The knee only really contributes, I think I read in the study, it was about the last 15 degrees of a skating stride is actually where the knee starts to like produce force. And then prior to that, it is only transmitting force that is being produced by the hips. Now, all that being said, you still need to be strong in the knees and the ankles. My contention here is that we don't waste time like focusing on the ankle when that's like the smallest part of contribution of skating. Now, if you were somebody who is like Connor McDavid, right? One of the fastest skaters the world's ever seen, or even like on the women's side of Kendall Coyne, right? And you have kind of maxed out like all your XP and everything, and now you can focus on the ankle a little bit, and that's going to give you a little bit more, great, right? But the vast majority of the youth hockey population has the hip mobility of an aging geriatric population, and thus the strength of a hip strength rather of an aging geriatric population. So to take the focus off of the hips and drive it into the ankles and knees is a stupid idea. It's not only like a bad idea, it is stupid. It's somebody who hasn't actually opened up the studies and read any of the data, deciding that oh, this looks important without looking back at any of the other data and just how it doesn't flow with what the overall goal is here. Like I get frustrated because I do care about the sport of hockey, because I grew up playing and understanding the data and what the data says, and then seeing what strength coaches are doing today is beyond frustrating. Like it's so irritating, because now I've got parents and coaches trying to tell me how important ankle mobility is, and that needs to be a focus of their child or their own strength training like routine. And it's like, yeah, we can do some of it, but overall that's going to be like a very small portion of what you're doing. It can be part of like the movement prep. I'm sorry, if you're in a group, chances are like that's going to fall to the wayside, because it's like not the lowest hanging fruit that we can go after. If you're a private client, then yeah, sure, we'll spend 5-10 minutes on ankle mobility, but we're going to get the same types of ankle movement and mobility increases from like skip variations, bound variations, depth drop jumps. There is zero reason to spend time, in my opinion, for the vast majority of athletes. There's zero reason to waste time on this ankle mobility nonsense, especially when it comes to hockey players. All right, now I'm going to, so this is not all doom and gloom. I think there are some good things. There's Coach Van Asten. He's the Calgary Flames strength and conditioning coach. I found like an old post of his where he's going over like various ankle range of motion stuff. And this is what I think has value, right? Not the super loaded knees over toes guy, heel wedges, all that nonsense. To me, that stuff is you're burning down the important things and stepping over dollars to pick up pennies that really aren't going to move the needle in any meaningful way. However, this stuff here, I find value in. I think it's good. Ooh, what is this? Yep. All right, so this is Coach Van Asten here, all right? So this changes everything. The fastest skaters have excellent ankle mobility. To be completely honest, like the vast majority of like the best hockey players have good ankle mobility. It's not just the fastest skaters, it's all of them. So these are movements, right, where he is just going through various ranges of motion, and this is like movement prep type stuff. You could think of this as, let's call it corrective exercises, or we used to call it back in the day prehab. This can be good. There are no real poor movements like cues here, but we can increase our overall range of motion and not destroy and not like burn everything else to the ground in the process. These distractions are great. Again, this stuff all takes like maybe 5 minutes, and it doesn't have to be the main focus of the lift. And here he is again, some rotations, some pronation and supination of the feet. these are good things, and these all, again, just take a few minutes. You can do them before. I'd probably do these after, to be completely honest, unless I'm doing like some movement. If I'm going to sprint or do some like high impact depth drop jumps, maybe we do these. I mean, this isn't bad, but most of his, if you watch his knees, most of his movement's coming from his hips here, not his ankles. I mean, could you make the argument that it's strengthening like the intrinsic muscles of the feet and maybe the ankles a little bit? Sure, but this is mostly hip rotation here, and even look at his torso. There you go. This is a good movement here, right? He's driving his big toe down into the ground while externally rotating at the ankle, creating some tibial internal rotation. Not a bad movement. And again, this is something you can do in the like movement prep in the beginning of your lift, and it's not going to be detrimental to the overall, to what you're trying to get out of the lift. Well, hopefully I've made my case here. I bounced around a little bit. I didn't really write down any notes, so I feel like I kind of got jumbled. But just know ankle mobility is not the end-all, be-all. Most hockey players have the requisite ankle mobility to be able to do the things they need to do. And to take the time away from developing the hips, especially like the in-range strength stuff for the hips, to take away from that to drive more force into the ankle and knee is a total exercise in futility. It's not going to pan out the way you think it is, and you will be a worse skater for doing it. That's going to be all for today. Again, go buy a book if you're here specifically for hockey. I have Total Hockey Training. It's available on Amazon. We've got it in paperback, hardback, and ebook. It's got great breakdowns of various parts of the game. 250 pages of training info. A really good chapter on conditioning and how we're kind of missing the mark when it comes to conditioning. Really good chapter on breaking down the LTAD and the ADM and what USA Hockey is getting wrong, in my opinion. And just things that work for athletes, for hockey players. Dynamic effort method for athletes. This is all about how I kind of manipulate the dynamic effort method when it comes to needing things for athletes like speed endurance, speed. It's still power. We do utilize the method in the way that it's kind of intended, how they did it at Westside, but we also manipulate it to the point of like looking nothing like the dynamic effort method because athletes need different things. And then Simple Strength it's a great book. It is a very simple way to organize your training if you're looking to get stronger and get bigger and get faster. It's very similar to 5-3-1, but in my opinion, obviously it's better. But check those out. You can find them on the website. I'll link it in the description. You can also find them on Amazon if you search for them. Just either search for my name or the name of the book, and they will pop right up. They're all relatively inexpensive. But if you're interested, go check them out. Got a little bit more time, so maybe we'll do some more episodes moving forward. I think it's my third one this week, and we're on Thursday, so awesome. And I think that's going to be it. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, go buy all the books. Check out all the, I'll link in the description also the articles that I've written on these subjects. And check them out, and we'll see you next time.
You know what time it is? No talk, just vibes.
She said she missed that feel. I told her about that new drug. See slow at the jet set.